Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Tuesday morning, still here in Clarksville, Tennessee, before we head back down to Memphis. But we got a lot to talk about today. Vince Ferrara is going to join us here in just a few minutes. The sports animal up in Knoxville covers Tennessee. We'll also have in hour number 2, Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, covers Georgia, and Rodney Orr in the final segment from Tuscaloosa Tide covers the Tide with Tider Insider. It's only $48 a year. It's about as good a deal as you'll find anywhere if you follow Alabama, and a lot of people do. Remember, Rodney and Gary Harris on Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. They will do their show, Tider Insider TV, 6:30 p.m. live. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a great show. Learn a lot about college football. This past weekend, I think a lot of people, and we talked about it yesterday on the show, Alabama, just Nick Saban, this may be the best coaching job he's done in a long time. And we talked about it. They don't have, Derrick Henry in the backfield to hand the ball off to. They have just made it work with whatever they've got. I don't think you're going to see half the all-SEC team peppered with Alabama players this year. And it's Jalen Milroe won't be the all-conference quarterback. I'm sure Jaden Daniels will get that. But Nick Saban has probably had more fun coaching this team because he's had to do a lot of basic things and get going when a lot of people counted him out after the Texas loss. And you can't do that. That's how fans are. Fans tend to think, well, you lose a game early, it's all over. But a couple of things I want to bring in and talk about. One of them is what's going on at Clemson. Dabo has won 10 games or more 12 times since he took over halfway through the 2008 season. So you really can't count that season. From 1900 to 2007, Clemson had only won 10-plus games in a season, 10 or more games, 12 times. Dabo, since taking over midway through 2008, has done it 12 times. So keep in mind, everybody wants to kick coaches out. First sign of a weakness. He's not a big fan of the portal. He likes his culture. He likes the way he does things. We'll see what he does. A lot of notes here on college football, though. You look at that Dabo is under siege. We'll see if he sticks around. I think he can stay as long as he wants. Well, he's got a massive contract, over $10 million a year. Let's look at Arizona, their turnaround. It's been amazing. They beat UCLA over the weekend. They're 6-3 in their final season in the Pac-12. Arizona will join the Big 12 next year. In the previous 3 seasons, which included the shortened virus year of 2020, and the Pac-12 didn't even start playing football until the first week of November in the fall of 2020. Arizona posted a 6-23 overall record. It also coincides with the hiring of current head coach Jed Fish. He's done a hell of a job rebuilding the Arizona football program. Look at this past weekend. What is an upset anymore in college football? Indiana 20-14 over Wisconsin. Michigan State 20-17 over Nebraska. Clemson 31-23 over Notre Dame. Arkansas goes on the road, wins in overtime. I'm telling you, the 12 p.m. Eastern, the noon game, the 11 a.m. Central game favors the road team. Arkansas jumped up on top 14-0. Florida just wasn't able to come back. Dave Tompkins on Savant Saturday on the roundtable said, he's a West Point grad, said, look, I think what I might do this weekend is just not get all worked up about what Army's doing. They're playing Air Force. Air Force is 8-0. They'll probably do well. Dave was right. Army 23, Air Force 3. Mike Gundy talked at great lengths about Bedlam. This was the 118th meeting between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. All right. Oklahoma, they're going to kill them. Oklahoma State wins 27-24. Illinois 27-26 over Minnesota. So really, what are upsets? Look at some of the numbers. Caden Slater, quarterback at Liberty, 16 of 25, 297 yards, 4 touchdowns, 50 rushing yards. Look at Dylan Washington, running back, Dylan Johnson at Washington, 26 carries, 256 yards, 4 touchdowns. A couple of more noteworthy. Bo Nix, quarterback Oregon, 29 of 38, 386 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 rushing TDs. And then Jalen Milroe, we all saw that. Alabama 42-28 in Tuscaloosa Saturday night over LSU. 15 of 23 for 219 yards passing. Jalen Milroe also had 20 carries for 155 yards. And get this, 4 touchdowns. Who was the better quarterback on the field Saturday night, Jalen Milroe or Jaden Daniels? Yeah, we can argue. I mean, Daniels dominated. The defense for Alabama is legit. They are. Kevin Steele, what would you expect? The guy, he gets the job done. Okay. Quinshon Judkins, Ole Miss running back against Texas A&M, 23 carries, 102 yards, 3 touchdowns. How good is Texas A&M? Their defensive front has been considered one of the better, front sevens around. But the Aggies are struggling. Okay, run down the standings to remind you. Alabama sitting there on top, 6-0 in the SEC West, 8-1. Ole Miss 5-1, 8-1. Now the head-to-head matchup, we know Alabama beat Ole Miss. LSU 4-2, 6-3. A&M 3-3, 5-4. Auburn 2-4 in the SEC, 5-4 overall. Arkansas 1-5 in the SEC, and 3-6 overall. Mississippi State 1-5 in the West, 4-5 overall. Look, it's going to be a tough year. A&M is going to struggle to have a winning record. So is Florida. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. You think Jimbo is back at Texas A&M? We're going to find out. All this big talk about $75 million, that's nothing to A&M. Well, if you remember what Jackie Sherrill said on the show about 2 weeks ago, when oil's at $85 or $90 a barrel, it's not really good for the rest of the country, but it's great for the economy in Texas. The state legislature in Texas gives 2/3 of the oil and gas mineral rights, whatever, to the University of Texas every year. They give 1/3 to Texas A&M. So I guess, like the federal government, they don't mind just flushing money down the toilet. But if A&M decides to move on and fire Jimbo Fisher, think about this. The last 2 coaches, Kevin Sumlin, they paid him $25 million to go away. All right. Then they paid, they would be paying, sadly, they'd be paying Jimbo Fisher $75 million to not coach. So the record at Texas A&M through 69 games, Jimbo Fisher 44-25, Kevin Sumlin 47-22. You can talk all day long about how much money Texas A&M has, how nice their facilities are, how cool their stadium is, how the fans stand, which is great. They love their school. They got a lot of traditions, and some of them are quirky. Of course, all traditions are quirky if you really look at them. But if money alone can solve it, I don't think it's really a problem. A&M, they don't have the culture to do it. They can't figure it out. How does a school like Clemson do it? Far less resources. I know they're in the ACC, but still, they're not having a great year this year. But you look at Alabama historically. and Auburn. Look at Ole Miss, the state with 2.85 million people. I'm telling you, Texas is going to come in. A&M's endowment's $19 billion. Texas's endowment is $42 billion. Okay. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You better have the right culture, the right people. That's probably why Dabo is so adamant about saying, look, I'm not going to just absolutely embrace the portal. Look at the ACC. This is worth a second look. Florida State on top, 9-0 overall, undefeated in the league. Louisville's 8-1. Georgia Tech, Brent Key, taking over, is 5-4, 4-2 in the ACC. Boston College 6-3, Duke 6-3, NC State 6-3, North Carolina 7-2, and they gave up a gazillion yards in some losses, over 350 on the ground. I just got to tell you, Mac Browne, people love the guy. I mean, I'm a big fan. I think he's cool as hell. They're 7-2, not getting the job done. Look at Virginia Tech. What's happened to the Hokies? They don't recruit like they used to. Clemson, 3-4 in the ACC, 5-4 overall. It's just hard to believe Clemson can go from 2015 through 2019, that 5-year period. They only lost 5 games. They played for the national championship 4 times. How quickly you can fall from the top of the mountain. Coaches will tell you it's easier to get to the top than it is to stay on top. That's human nature. It's the psychology. So it says a lot about the duality of man, the subtleties. I mean, how can you not handle success? Some people view success as a hellacious burden. For whatever reason, they do. And they struggle. They struggle with success. So look at the scoring offenses around the country. Oregon on top, averaging 47 points a game. Southern Cal number 2 at 45. LSU third at 45. Washington 41. Michigan almost 41. Penn State 40. SMU 40. Oklahoma almost 40. FSU 39.6 and Georgia 39.3. The defenses in the Pac-12 aren't as good as the defenses in the SEC. No doubt about it. Michigan, look at this. Scoring defense. Number 1 in the country, giving up less than 7 points a game. Ohio State, number 2, just under 11 points a game. Penn State third at under 12. And Iowa fourth at just under 14. Wow. What is that telling you, folks? How good is the SEC? How good is the ACC? How good is the Big 10? The Big 12? The ACC? Sun Belt? AAC? Listen, when we go to this 12-team playoff next year, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think you're going to start seeing the portal. It can help you, but you better get it right. Nobody does a better job of getting the right players to come in and fit and fill the needs than Lane Kiffin does at Ole Miss. Go back a couple of years ago, Mel Tucker was a rock star at Michigan State. Brought in 15 guys, and all of them were big contributors in the portal. In 2021, they went 11-2 with Peyton Thorne as their quarterback. The next year, they had a losing year. Okay? You look at Ole Miss's portal guys. Trey Harris comes from Louisiana Tech. Trey Harris had 219 yards receiving in the game Saturday, 38-35 Ole Miss win against Texas A&M. That guy is a bona fide stud. He will succeed. He will have a great, I think, I'll predict it, he'll have a great career in the NFL. And you can say all day long that when you look at college football, the portal and NIL, you're seeing it. the NIL deals, what's that done to Southern Cal? When Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, he went to Southern Cal. He took 25 players, maybe I guess 25 of them, including Caleb Williams, who won the Heisman Trophy last year. Now Southern Cal is 6-3, and it doesn't matter how many NIL deals that Caleb Williams has, the team's not winning. And that's why it's true. Players are saying it. They're coming out and saying it. Like we didn't guess this would happen. You can divide your locker room. When you've got guys that have big NIL deals, well, all of a sudden they can check out. Say, well, what do I have to worry about? I've got all the money I need. I'm going to go to the NFL. Caleb Williams is the one who came out recently and said, whatever team drafts him, hey, I want to be a part owner. I said, dude, it doesn't work that way. That's not how it happens. Okay, we will take a quick commercial break. Be right back. Vince Ferrara joins us from Sports Animal up in Knoxville. But I'm giving a lot of stats out today. They make sense, but we'll be right back with more sense.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Hi, Rob Browne back here with you. And, there's all kinds of stuff that's being said about college football, what's happening with the portal and all. The bottom line is, if you want to keep a locker room together and you want to have a team of players that you can win with, you got to have them together for a while. It's no different than in the days of junior college. And Vince, you remember this. If you didn't get a junior college kid in for spring practice and he couldn't come in until the summer for the August practices, it was very difficult for them to catch on. And that's what you're having now with the portal. It's the same thing. I'd love to see an audit, Vince. The portal began October 15th of 2018. So we got 5 years of data. But I bet over 50% of the kids that go in the portal are orphaned. They don't get picked up. And the same problems that you have at school A will manifest themselves at school B and school C. And wait until these kids start going for job interviews and potential employers look at them and go, Vince, hold on. Let me see if I got this right. You signed with UCF out of high school in Orlando. Then you transferred to Georgia Tech. And then you transferred to Alabama. And now you're at Arkansas State. If I hire you, are you going to quit on me and just go from job to job to job? That's where this stuff's going to start sticking. But if you get the right guys in the portal that can really help you, I'm curious of the players that Josh Heupel's bringing in at Tennessee. Who are some of the stars right now on the team that are contributing, meaningful production? And I'm curious because every school is different. And do they go get guys out of Group of 5 schools, or do they only get them out of Power 5 schools? Because I know that Brewne McCoy was a Southern Cal transfer, and he's hurt, and he certainly is one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, Rob, there's a lot there, and good to be with you again. There's multi-year guys in a portal, right? Tennessee has guys that, like Brewne McCoy, that came in the portal, but from the previous year. So,
yeah.
A big part of rosters are one-time portals, and Tennessee certainly has their fair share of that. One of their tight ends, they basically have co-starting tight ends, McAllen Castles, who caught Nico Iamaleava, the five-star quarterback's first touchdown pass in that UConn game.
Yeah.
He's a transfer from Cal Poly. Andre Karch on their offensive line is a transfer from Texas. Gerald Mincy, their starting right tackle, is a transfer from Florida. Dante Thornton, who is starting to pick it up and come on a little bit as of late at wide receiver, he's a transfer from Oregon. Joe Milton was a transfer from Michigan. Actually, their third-string quarterback, Gaston Moore, is a transfer from UCF, where he was there with Josh Heupel on defense. Omar Norman Lott, starter at defensive tackle, is a transfer from Arizona State. Who else? Trying to think who else on that D line. Keenan Peely, who started the year as a starting linebacker, transfer from BYU, but he's been out. He'll come back and he'll be a starter when he comes back. Gabe Giudicelli, a transfer from BYU. He's a starter at cornerback. Also, Wesley Walker, starting safety, transfer from Georgia Tech. Two DBs, one of which is out for the year. Their best DB, Kamal Haddon, was a transfer from Auburn, your school, and then Brandon Turnage, reserve DB, transfer from Alabama. So they got, and there's more of them. They got a ton of them at Tennessee. Yeah. It's not the only thing they've used. They've used recruiting, but it has certainly been a factor in what this team is, and that's part of why they're a little bit more of an experienced squad too, because you go with these guys that are a little bit closer, more mature to being ready to be fully developed. And now you can get that impact a little bit quicker than some of those high school guys.
Yeah, and if you don't properly vet these guys, it's no different than bringing in a guy in Major League Baseball or basketball, the NBA, the NFL. You know, you get a guy that comes in and he's a cancer in the locker room. That's not a good move. So you've got to vet these guys properly. But, you know, the guys have always transferred. I would love to see the statistics, the comparative numbers historically of the number of people who transferred before we had the portal and how much more that's gone up. I know it's gone up, but I think it's starting to show the same thing that happened with junior college, Vince, is that when guys transfer or they come in from junior college, well, they're in junior college usually because they got problems, academic problems. They could have off the field problems. They could have both. It's not to say that all kids in junior college they're not bad kids. It's just they've got issues. So when you get those kids on your campus, you better hope that you vetted them properly. And, you know, Dabo Swinney at Clemson, I pointed this out when I was going over a bunch of stuff before you came on. From 1900 to 2007, Clemson only won 10 games or more 12 times in 107 years. Since Dabo took over midway through 2008 when Tommy Bowden was forced out, they've won 10 games or more on 12 different seasons. They're not going to do it this year. But now Dabo won't. He doesn't like the portal. He likes to have his culture. Kirby Smart doesn't hate the portal. He just doesn't use it that much. But Georgia's doing a phenomenal job of recruiting and evaluating the kids out of high school. And I think when they won the national championship, there weren't but a couple of guys that came in via the portal. And, you know, it can work. Tennessee's, man, that what I see with Josh Heupel, they can throw the ball all over the place, but they can run it when they need to. They got a big matchup Saturday in Columbia. Let's talk about that. How good is this Missouri team from what you've seen?
Well, Rob, they can they can do more than run it when they want to. They're number one in the SEC in rushing, number one in rush defense. We're not used to seeing Tennessee teams be that good. I mean, they're consistent in 250 yards per game. They had 275 against UConn. What the difference was is they went back to hitting on some of their deep shots like last year. So it looked like last year's offense more with the quick drives and hitting on their deep shots, which they haven't always been able to do. The run game has actually carried them this year until they've gotten Joe Milton comfortable. Joe Milton now has strung together 3 straight games of his best football. Now we're starting to see the Joe Milton that a lot of us expected before the year. It just took him a while. As Josh Heupel pointed out, this is the first year that Joe Milton has been the starter in their system. So being the guy and having all those decisions to make and the accuracy, the timing, and then be on the same page with a bunch of different receivers who have option routes. They have to see the exact same thing the quarterback does. And if they see it the same but don't see it as quick or on time, then that's when you're going to have throws that are offline. So we're seeing the best version of Joe Milton, and part of it is him. Part of it is the players around him getting more comfortable.
Yeah.
And part of it, Rob, is the coaches now are figuring out what works best for Milton. You're starting to see them call more plays in a variety of ways and not relying on the same 1 or 2 throws to try to get him in a rhythm. You've seen him use the middle of the field a little bit more, trusting him down the field more, involving him in the run game, which relaxes him. So this Tennessee is clicking on its best cylinders that we've seen offensively. Now, to your question, how good is Missouri? They're outstanding, especially offensively. Missouri brings a lot to the table. And, there's some categories where Tennessee's better. There's some categories where Mizzou is better. I think on offense, there's no question to me that the best trio of quarterback, running back, wide receiver is what Tennessee will face on Saturday in Columbia with Brady Cook, Cody Schrader, the leading rusher in the SEC, and Luther Burden, arguably the best receiver in the SEC. So it will be a challenge for Tennessee's defense that overall has been very good this year, but they will face, if they can't get home to the quarterback, it could be tough for Tennessee, and it could very well end up being a shootout. Mizzou will give up some points. Tennessee's defensive numbers are better in most categories than Missouri's, but they're not horrific. Tennessee has improved a lot on defense from a year ago. Missouri has improved some, but this is a much different Missouri team than what it looked like on paper going into the season, Rob.
Yeah, and the fans at Missouri, they don't know what to think. I mean, some of them probably wish they were in the Big Ten. A lot of them wish they still were in the Big 12. But in the first 3 years, when Gary Pinkel, 12, 13, and 14, 12 was their first year. 13 and 14, they went to Atlanta and played Auburn and Alabama in consecutive years and lost the SEC championship, but they played for it. And I just look at Missouri, and there's an interesting comment from Larry. Mizzou struggles to close in big games. This is Tennessee's opportunity to look. Tennessee's already lost to Alabama, and they've lost to Florida. And the big three are, for them, I think, are Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. But the way Missouri's playing this year, this is a way sort of to offset that loss to Florida. That's how big this is for Tennessee.
Well, the East is still there for them. It's a real long shot, Rob, but technically they still can win the East. Obviously, they're going to need to take care of business and win at Missouri, which, look, a lot of fans are going to expect one way or the other because of the name of their school versus the name of Tennessee and the history of both. So, but there's plenty of other fans that realize this is tough and still see some issues and some concerns with Tennessee. So it's not 100% across the board where everyone thinks Tennessee's going to roll them. But I think obviously Tennessee has to take care of business, and then they'll have to root for Lane Kiffin because the only way Tennessee can get to Atlanta is if Georgia suffers 2 losses and they're sitting at 6-0, with Tennessee being at 2 losses. So they'd have to beat Missouri, then Ole Miss win at Georgia, and then Tennessee would need to beat Georgia to where they'd have the head-to-head tiebreaker with both of those 2 teams with 2 losses in the division. So it's the East race is down to Tennessee and Georgia, basically, with it obviously being a long shot for the Vols.
Like when you look at Tennessee's path, obviously just went out, and Georgia's only got, they haven't lost, but I saw an ESPN ranking this morning. They got them 6th. Everyone's trying to pick them apart. And then you look at Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. They'll all eat each other. They'll all play each other. But Tennessee, I think what we're seeing with Josh Heupel is he's changed the narrative about these up-tempo offenses. They play physical football. And Joe Milton, you're right. Last week against Kentucky on the road, he was 18 of 21. And then they dominated, obviously, against UConn Saturday. But in your opinion, are you seeing a lot of progress with the short stuff, the intermediate passes? Because we know he's got the cannon for an arm. But you said it best about 5 minutes ago. It's his first year to be the starter. Question is can he come back next year? But he seems like he's much calmer. Who is the one he leans on the most? Is it Heupel, or what other coach is it? Because he has changed, and you're right.
Well, it's 3 consecutive games of playing really well. He only had a couple of incompletions in the UConn game as well. I think it was 11 of 14. But he didn't have to play the second half because Tennessee scored 3 defensive touchdowns, which had never been done in program history before. Think about that. 3 defensive touchdowns, and not only 3 in one game for the first time all time, Rob. 3 consecutive touchdowns were defensive scores, of fumble, scoop, score, and then 2 straight pick sixes to start the second half. And so it got up to balloon to 49-3 just like that. So they didn't need to bring out, the offensive starters. They started to substitute on defense already at that point. But Joe Milton didn't have to play the second half. He became Coach Milton and helping out the schematics and what Nico was seeing out there. And Nico, even though he got in the game, he still only played 2 drives and 15 snaps because Tennessee went to their 3rd and 4th team quarterbacks. That's how much of a blowout it got, and that's how much the second half was basically shrunk down. So he's doing everything much better, Rob. It's not just this is what he's doing well, this is what he's not doing well. He's hitting on his deep shots. He has been accurate in all kinds of routes. They are running a few more routes and trusting him more in the middle of the field. This coaching staff has figured out what he can do well and what he's comfortable with. And then he is showing them that he can do more. He's also, the last couple of games, Rob, he's been able to make plays by throwing on the run. That was a big narrative earlier in the year because ESPN trotted out there in a game, might have been the Florida game, where he has 0 career at that point, had 0 career touchdown passes outside of the pocket on the move. Well, now, while on the run, he's making accurate throws. It's not just standing still in the pocket. So he's showing more diversity, and he's become a running threat. Even if they don't do it a bunch, it's just a threat that's there, and that helps the run game. So he's doing everything on a higher level, and he's more confident. Who he leans on, I think he's an energy guy, and so he works with Heupel a lot, but works with their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, Joey Halsley, as well, who's a very positive reinforcement type of coach with them, and I think that serves Milton well.
Yeah, you don't want to go over to the sidelines and have some Debbie Downer talking to you or chewing your ass. I mean, that kind of coaching, it doesn't work. You gotta. I've heard a lot of coaches say they don't allow their quarterbacks to have negative thoughts, and they spend a lot of time in the backfield at practice watching body language. Josh Heupel seems like he'd be a lot of fun to play for, but you can tell he's got a gear. He'll jump your ass. If you better be producing, but if you're working hard, he's going to make the hard work fun. And that's what a great coach can do.
Well, I talked to Jim Mora during the week, who it seems like, Rob, every time I do an interview with someone, they say or do something after that gets fans mad at them, but that's after they talk to me. But so Jim Mora was highly complimentary of Tennessee going into the game, and he said one of the things he was most impressed by was how much not just Joe Milton settling in, but Josh Heupel figuring out what Joe Milton does best and the offense does best and adapting to that with their play calls. And he said that's one of the biggest signs of a really good coach is adapting to your personnel. So, yeah, Josh Heupel has a system. He has plays that he runs, but he's going to call things that bring out the best in their players. And it's taken Josh Heupel, I think, as the play caller this year, as opposed to not doing it full time last year. It's taken him some time to figure it out. And look, it's been a moving target because Milton's gotten better. So maybe what he thought Milton could do earlier in the year, now he's got a couple more pages of things that he's willing to call. And then the receivers are helping out also. So that expands what Heupel is willing to call. So, look, what you're saying, though, applies to the quarterback position. It doesn't apply to all positions, though, because as you know, Rodney Garner is a tough coach where you can't get caught up in how it's said. You got to focus on what is being said. And actually, we'll be talking to Rodney Garner today in one of the media avails. So he's always a treat to talk to because he keeps it real on his guys.
Yeah, and I think what I was meaning, coaches are going to chew your tail, chew your ass during the game. That's part of it, but it's got to have a reason behind it. I mean, you just yelling at the clouds, that doesn't work. And it's not that being soft. It's just when you're screaming at people, they're going to tune you out. I raised 3 kids of my own. I mean, good Lord, you scream, they're not listening to you after about the 4th or 5th word. So you might think they are, they're not. You got to be calm. I remarried Audrey, Evolve for Life, and Mallory's Alabama, and she's calm. She watches body language. She watches Tennessee. She's looking at body language. And what I'm seeing with Tennessee, you lose Brew McCoy. That was a big injury. But he stayed part of the team. He wants that. That's big when guys do that because then you start playing, a part of you is playing for him, and that transfers throughout the team. And you're right about Rodney Garner. He always gets production out of his guys, and he's great for college football. He's a killer recruiter too. Yeah. he's lethal. I mean, because he's real, and he goes in these kids' houses, and the moms, and dads, and the family. That's what they want to hear most of the time. If you asked him, I would just guess he ain't talking X's and O's. He ain't talking about football. He's talking about life. I mean, you get to talk to him today, but he is a guy that wherever he goes, good things happen. All right, you look at Missouri, their running game. They've got the best running game in the conference. Is this a weird year? But Quinshon Judkins came in as the top running back. And, some things happen. Rocket Sanders at Arkansas. Who is the best running back in the SEC this year? Who's got the stats?
It's Cody Schrader. So Missouri has the leading rusher in Schrader, but they don't have, as a team collectively, Tennessee's the leading rushing team in the Southeastern Conference. So as far as individual, it's probably Schrader. And look, he's a guy that can run on the perimeter with those zone runs, and he can put his foot in the ground and get vertical on you quickly. He seeks contact. He was even seeking contact in the Georgia game, so he can run between the tackles. He's a tough guy that I don't think people were banking on. I'd have to go back and check, but I don't know that he was on a ton of those preseason all-conference lists, but he looks the part for sure. And then that's what makes Missouri so tough is they are balanced. They're not one-dimensional. And I think now that Tennessee's offense is starting to hit on some of those deep shots, and you see the passing game evolve. Receivers are starting to make plays for Joe Milton, and the tight ends are becoming more involved. They utilize the running backs a little bit more in the pass game. I would like to see them do it more with multiple backs in the game at the same time, but they've done it without and they finally played D. Williams, their return specialist. He finally debuted on offense. It's been a topic almost all season. And the first play that Nico was in there, D. Williams took a jet sweep push pass for 11 yards, and then he stayed in the game for a little bit in that drive. But that's another potential weapon for them offensively if they can incorporate him more into the passing game. So that Tennessee has developed its balance, whereas when they were struggling, it was a little bit more just the run game, and they got to figure out how to get the pass game going. So now they are balanced. Missouri brings that to the table. It's not just Luther Burden. They have several really good receivers. Brady Cook is good with those deep balls. Brady Cook also can make plays with his legs. That's something that Josh Heupel was really talking about yesterday and focusing on. Got to contain him, not let him leak out. But here's one thing, too, that's in Tennessee's favor. Tennessee has destroyed Missouri the last 2 years, 66 and 62 points the last 2 years. Yeah, last year Missouri they played Georgia as good as anybody. You know what happened? They still gave up over 60 points to Tennessee after that. Yeah. So it might be just a really good matchup thing with Georgia or bad matchup thing with Tennessee. We'll see. The weather is not going to be crazy cold. It's not expected to be not like it can be in Columbia this time of year. So I think Tennessee's in a good position, but it is no lock based on names or school history. This is still a very dangerous game for the Vols.
No, I totally agree. And let's look at a couple of things. One, I want to ask your thoughts about the clock, the running clock. Who is that really benefiting? Now, Major League Baseball has benefited. I think the numbers are going to prove it. More people are watching and going to the games because they don't last forever. We got the average time down to like 2 hours, 38 minutes. College football, it's more commercials and it's more time for the guys on the TV, ESPN, Fox, CBS, whatever. That's what I see. But is it benefiting and making the game of college football better?
It's shortening it with some plays too. It's not just the total time, Rob. It's Gerald Hodges, who's the longtime on-field and SEC replay official in the SEC. He does a weekly 2 segments with us on Tuesday mornings, including this morning. I typically try to ask him for updated stats that he gets from the leagues as to how much it's shortening it. The last few weeks, they haven't passed that info to him, so I don't have any new info. But at last check, it was 7 to 8 plays and 3 to 4 minutes shorter. So it's not drastic, but they're looking at it as, hey, fewer plays, the totality it saves on injuries and has a chance to keep players healthier that way. It could also be a full drive for one team also. So, that's how they're looking at it. There's not, a drastic change. And it makes, if the game is shorter, it makes the commercial stand out because they're still going to get that same a lot in there. But it doesn't add to, the commercials. It just makes them stand out a little bit more because you got less game. But hey, if you get to the end result of a final earlier, I don't know that that's a bad thing, especially when some of these games would go too long, and then you add penalties to it too to slow a game down. That's also a factor in it too. Yeah,
and it makes it harder for a comeback if you've got one less possession.
Right,
that can be costly. But hurry up, no huddle, and all that. The tempo. I think we've seen fewer guys fake injuries. There's not as much of that. Maybe the message got through. And didn't you say last week false starts are the biggest penalties?
Yes, according to Gerald Hodges, before past weekend's games, there had been 1,300 false starts called in the FBS. That's actually down 200 from 1,500 this time last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It does. That part of it will slow it down. The penalties will for sure, but I don't think it's a bad thing personally. You know what also works back in the favor of comebacks, and I bring this up with Gerald all the time. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. At the end of games, when teams are in a hurry, you see the officials that normally will have their procedure in spotting the ball. They'll just drop the ball and get out of the way. And like you're supposed to make sure everybody's across the line of scrimmage. You're supposed to make sure the officials are all in their spot, and then you get out of the way to free it up. Yes, you have to have a little bit higher urgency in those situations, but it's like they throw everything out the window. It's just a matter of, we touch the ball. You can go ahead. And you just throw the rules out the window so much. I wish they would be more consistent to the regular game in those situations.
Yeah, and the bottom line is the crowds. I mean, we were at the Skinner box. That's the new name my wife Audrey gave Vanderbilt's retrofitted stadium. You know what a Skinner box is? And when they put the mice and the rats in the box and they have to figure their way out, getting out of that stadium was difficult. My recommendation, it's going to be beautiful when they finish it. But, it's 40 plus years of everything trying to be done at once. But the crowds everywhere you go are just massive for college football. Vince, I know you got to go, but this is Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, covers Georgia. And, I have to get y'all on, kind of do a Q&A a couple of weeks because that big one's coming up on the 18th. But and Jordan, he's the one who made sense. North Georgia people, Tennessee's the game. It's and a lot of their fans, it's the game. Again, you got Missouri before that, and Georgia's got Ole Miss Saturday. But man, this next year, can y'all imagine what it's going to be like with a 12-team playoff? The excitement and the conversations, because they're going to be. I don't know if James Madison will be eligible next year, but how crazy will the folks in Harrisonburg, Virginia, be going next year if they're sniffing a playoff? I mean, I think it will be exactly what the people behind. We had Bill Hancock on the show last week. That's what he said, and the adults have tried. Tony Barnhart's right. Even the adults can't screw up college football. It's fun. But Vince, let people know how they can follow you, keep up with all the great work you do. And I know you've been up since about 4:30, 5 o'clock your time.
Yeah, 4:30, and it'll be a long day for sure. Still, it's not like I'm going to go to bed when I get done with talking to you, but I appreciate it. It's at Vince Sports, VINCE Sports on X, formerly known as Twitter, and that's also the same handle on all of my socials, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. It's also a YouTube channel. Do a post-game wrap-up videos from the stadiums down the field afterwards, and then blogs and all kinds of fun stuff. So 991thesportsanimal.com is where you can get our podcast of our morning show, and then Duval Network pregame interviews now for football and basketball. The college basketball season open. Tennessee with a home win yesterday. So this overlap, it's on a different level. And we're in the high school football playoffs as well. We got a second round game this Friday night. I got, past VFL's former Vols as my analyst rotating in and out. So it's a lot to track down and be a part of. But yeah, that's where we're at. Vince Sports is where you can track it all.
Hey, Vince, we always appreciate you taking time to join us. And hopefully you can get you a quick nap maybe some point during the day. But look forward to doing this again next week. Hopefully y'all are going to get the road win.
Yep. It'll certainly be good for business when that happens. People think that we want controversy and we root against the home team. That's just stupidity. What's best is when you're competing for championships.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate it, and I'll look forward to talking to you next week.
All right. Take care. All right. Great stuff. And Jordan, let me say this real quick. Up on the screen, Red River Ford Toyota, Wynne, Arkansas, 45 minutes from Memphis. No vehicle payments on all vehicles until 2024. Lynn Hutchison, the new service manager, we met him last Thursday. I was getting some work done on my car. And these people over there are committed to making the buying experience just the beginning of an even better experience. The service department, they're open Saturdays, 7 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. if you can't get there during the week. But they're open Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., RedRiverFordToyota.com. Tons of vehicles in stock. over 700 pre-owned cars, trucks, and SUVs on the lot as well. Proud to have them as a sponsor, as well as Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Over 7,000 pairs of boots. Second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. And they got a ton of Filson, Old South, Devil Dog jeans. Biggest collection of Duckhead I've ever seen. STS wear, Kimes Ranch. They've got Pendleton, Schaefer, Hire Boots, Vask, Danners. Just bought a new pair of Danner hiking boots out there. They are fantastic. Get all your needs, and Christmas will be here soon, folks. Start shopping ahead. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Jordan, man, this past weekend against Missouri, let's get your thoughts on that game, and then we'll focus on this Ole Miss game. But this is a tough league, isn't it?
Definitely, and Kirby was asked that after the game if this was the toughest game, and he was like, "They're all tough." He said, "Bro," whoever it was who asked it, he said, "Bro, they're all tough." Yeah. That's what it is, living in this league, and I mean, Missouri. I think Missouri deserves a ton of credit. Gave Georgia all it could handle, and I think ultimately came down to turnovers. Georgia gets Nazir Stackhouse. He's like 320. Brady cooked the ball right to him, and hey, I was impressed. I mean, he just brought it right in his gut and took off running. And then they had another interception a little bit later that basically ended Missouri's hopes. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those games. You knew that Missouri was going to come in wanting to make something happen, go out, and once again, third straight SEC game. We have seen Georgia's opponent go right down the field and score on game's open drive. But then after that, it's sort of been the same story again and again that Georgia kind of settles down. Now, Missouri made plays. I was really impressed with Cody Schrader, the way he ran the ball. He averaged 5.1 yards a carry, made a lot of plays. Brady Cook made a lot of plays, and they really targeted the perimeter, a lot of outside throws. Theo Weiss, Luther Burden had a few plays outside of a big 39-yard touchdown on that opening drive. But Georgia settled in, made the plays they had to have. They outscored Missouri 14-3 in the third quarter. I thought that was kind of where the game turned. And it kind of went from a deadlock where you went into the second half saying, this is anybody's ball game, to Georgia kind of setting the tone. Missouri had its chances. They cut the lead to 6, I believe, early in the fourth quarter. But Georgia made the plays they had to have. So not the prettiest win. Had to fight for 4 quarters to get it, but you kind of get used to seeing games like that in this conference. And as long as you're able to win, you smile, you go back and watch the film and figure out ways to get better next week.
Well, just looking at these stats, and I'm pulling them up here. The passing leaders in the SEC. Jaden Daniels, LSU, 2,792. Look who's number 2. Carson Beck. You can't say he's quietly having a great year. He's the quarterback for the number 1 team in the country, or number 2 for people outside of Ohio. But, that kid came in as a high 4, maybe a 5-star, and he's, stayed there at Georgia. And Kirby Smart talked about it in the offseason all summer. He said, this is a kid who's bought into our culture, and he's from Jacksonville. He had a lot of fun winning that game down there. Talk about his development. What kind of grade do you give him up to this point?
I mean, I would say probably a B+ or an A-. He's done a very good job. Done a pretty good job of taking care of the football. There was a stretch where he threw a pick in a couple games in a row, but on the whole has done a very good job. In that Missouri game, he kind of showed you his legs a little bit more than we've seen. It's been months to this point in the year, but he had some really timely runs that were very helpful in extending drives. He's done an excellent job. I think the biggest thing has impressed me, and you've seen it, especially these last few games without Brock Bowers, how willing he is to throw the ball to different guys. I mean, Ladd McConkey's stepped up without Brock, but Dominic Lovett had a really good game, and that was going against his former team. Ra Thomas had some big plays. Oscar Delp, I thought that was probably Oscar Delp's best game in terms of being a pass catcher and that win against the Tigers. So Carson's just done a very good job. And, even going back to the offseason, Kirby Smart kept saying, look, we're confident in him. It's not that we weren't confident in him when he wasn't starting. He was showing stuff. And I can remember, going back 2 springs ago, that there was a lot of buzz about Carson and that he was playing really well. And that, they just had Stetson Bennett in front of him. That's just sort of how it happens sometimes. But yeah, I think Carson's lived up to the hype. He's done a very good job. He's got some big challenges coming up. This Saturday is not going to be easy. And then going to Knoxville the week after that is definitely going to be difficult. But he's passed every test to this point, and I don't think you could really ask for much more out of him than what he's been able to do to this point.
Well, look at the leading rusher in the SEC, Cody Schrader, has less than 1,000 yards after 9 games. We're seeing, you can call it running back by committee or whatever you want to call it, but there's almost a push, and it's not publicly stated, but running backs are being told, look, your body can only take being hit so many times. Be on a team, and the coaches are doing it. They're spreading the carries around. You're not seeing many 35 or 40 carry a game running backs. And the average career in the NFL for a running back is about 4 or 5 years. Look at a guy like Derrick Henry out of Yulee, Florida, had over 12,000 yards in high school. And he's an exception. But, look at the top 5 running backs of all time. I don't think maybe one of them is over 5'9". Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, especially this day and age with the running backs, and I honestly think it kind of benefits everybody. One, you don't wear out those backs, especially think about if you're a team at Georgia's caliber, even Michigan, Ohio State. If you're going to make the playoff, you could be playing 15 games. You don't really want to be in a situation where you're running your lead back into the ground, especially early in the year. I think Ole Miss has done a good job with it. Obviously, Quinshon Judkins is really good, but they've got other backs behind him that I think have played really well on top of that. But you keep those guys fresh. You're able to work different backs in. You don't have to be a running back where you're like, oh, man, I'm behind these guys. I'm never going to play. Now, you may not play as much, but you still got a window to play. It helps them keep some tread on the tires if they do have NFL aspirations. And yeah, I mean, it is funny to think how much has changed, even since, the first time Mike Bobo was Georgia's offensive coordinator. They rode those guys. They really leaned heavily on those running backs. And, they've done a good job, Georgia specifically, when it comes to getting different guys involved. Dejan Edwards, Kendall Milton. Seeing him get Roderick Robinson back, he's been a little banged up. Cash Jones, a walk-on, they played him some. But yeah, I think people are really mindful of how they want to use their running backs. And when you're able to accumulate a lot of talent in that room, just makes it that much easier to get other guys involved.
It does. And you look at and if you've got – look at Auburn. I mean, Jamarian Fat Burnett out of Andalusia, he's not coming. I don't know if he was processed or he just looked at the depth chart. You don't know if Jarquez Hunter's going to come back next year, but you got Jeremiah Cobb, you got Damari Austin, you got Sean Jackson, Brian Bette. Man, if I'm a running back now, I'm going to say, hey, if I can get 10 carries a game, 12 carries a game, enough for the scouts to see what I can do, I'll be happy, especially if I'm in a winning program.
Definitely. I mean, and that's sort of where you've got to pick and choose your priorities because, maybe somebody wants to be lead back. Maybe somebody's more concerned about trying to get that on film and eventually make it the NFL. I know all these guys is to go on and play in the NFL, but my thing with any of the recruiting stuff, with any of the positions, you got to just go with whatever your priorities are. I know that it drives fans crazy sometimes when a guy flips or a guy won't make a decision. But if you have your priorities in order, and it'll make the decision so much easier, and will be something where maybe you'll want to stay there and not bet around like we see quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm putting up the numbers. I'm trying to get these typed up here for people, but Georgia has had as much success in the running back department as any school in college football for the last 30 years, 40 years. And how many people out there other than you can name the 2 deep, 3 deep Georgia running back depth chart? I mean, there's not a Lars Tate and Worley back. It's just a different. It's different. It's not that these guys aren't good. It's just their roles have changed.
Definitely, and that's sort of the nature of how offenses change. And even too, like when you look at this week's matchup, you have to consider guys like Jackson Dart, who he can move, he can run a little bit, and that kind of takes a little bit of maybe they would run the ball more with the running backs if they didn't have that threat. So yeah, I mean it's definitely something you always see offense evolving in college football, and I think the way that we've seen running backs their roles change. I think that kind of falls into place with that and how we've seen that change, even going back 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And looking here at these numbers, obviously Cody Schrader first with 919, Ray Davis second with 903. He's a transfer from Vanderbilt to Kentucky, but he ran all over Florida for 280-something yards. But against Georgia and against Tennessee, I don't think he had a total in those two games of more than 80 yards. That tells me if you're not doing it against the best teams, are you really that good? Is that fair?
That's definitely always the test, and you're going to see it again Saturday with John. You see he's there fourth with 793 yards.
Yeah.
Talking with some of my friends who cover Ole Miss, getting ready for this game. To me, if you tell me Ole Miss either wins this game or pushes Georgia, I think it's on Quinshon Judkins. I think that their run games has to have a very big day. Seeing where there is an opportunity to run the ball, like I mentioned with Cody Schrader, he played really well in that game Saturday. Florida really got off to a good start. I think in that first quarter against Georgia, they were averaging a little bit over 4 yards a carry, and then they fell behind. They kind of had to abandon the run and run it like I think they wanted to. So I think there is an opportunity for Ole Miss to run the ball in this Georgia defense. And if they're going to have a chance to pull up the upset, they're going to have to run well. I think Quinshon's going to have over 100 yards if Ole Miss is going to have a chance to win this one in Athens.
Yeah, Yancey Porter was talking with us last Friday on the show about Jackson Dart is just 19 years old. If you're not thinking, you think this kid's 23 or 24. He came from Canyon River, Utah or whatever, but he's a gunslinger. And Yancey charted his progress when he was at Ole Miss when they still had Luke Altmaier there, the kid out of Starkville, who played a lot in that Sugar Bowl loss to Baylor. But he kept saying he's the gunslinger, that mentality that Lane Kiffin looks for. Let's talk about the matchups. And I always like to say matchups are one thing on a Tuesday morning on sidelines.live. They're a completely different story on game day. Very few people have the analytical mind that Jordan Davis Hill does. So let's get your thoughts about what does Georgia need to do and what does Ole Miss need to do to get a win? Because this is going to be a game that's, Ole Miss almost lost to Texas A&M. They're not very good. You know how that works. They come out the next week after being told they're not any good, and they play the game of their lives. It'll be a full 60. This one will.
Definitely, and you can never use the transitive property when it comes to SEC because you got teams beating each other and then turning around. Florida beat Tennessee. Now they lose to Arkansas. To me, for Georgia, it's going to be third down. Ole Miss has not been very good at converting third down so far this season. Georgia, I thought it was a little uncharacteristic at how they put themselves in some bad situations against Missouri. A lot of runs for no gain or even loss on first and second down, setting up some long third downs. They average like 3rd and 7, and that's just not a good situation to put yourself in to have to convert those long 3rd and mediums, 3rd and longs. That's big to me. I think Georgia's got to run the ball better, and that kind of pieces in with setting up those manageable third downs. You sort of saw moments in that game from Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton. Kendall Milton had a big rushing touchdown in that game. Dejon Edwards, especially in the fourth quarter, broke a few runs that really let Georgia milk the clock and wind up winning that game. Again, I talked about Ole Miss's run game. I think that they've got to have a very productive day, and Georgia's defense is going to have to step up to stop them. And to me, it kind of goes on both sides. I think turnover margin is going to matter a whole lot in this game. Ole Miss leads the SEC. They're +8 in turnover margin. They don't turn the ball over very much. And if you look at that game we're talking about with Missouri, Georgia wins the turnover margin 2-0. And just 2 turnovers in the fourth quarter, I think, made the difference. I mean, it was 27-21 Missouri was nearly at midfield when Brady Cook throws it right to Nazir Stackhouse, and he makes the pick and takes off running. I think if that turnover doesn't happen, Missouri winds up taking the lead on that drive. And there probably would have been 4 or 5 minutes left in that game. It wouldn't have been decided, but that was a huge momentum swing. And I think turnover margin is going to have a lot to say with who wins this game on Saturday. And I'm really convinced if Ole Miss is going to win this game, they have to win the turnover margin.
Yeah, turnovers will kill you. You look, is Georgia now, this is 26 straight. And as you keep climbing, the all-time record was that 28 that Alabama had until they lost?
Twice. Yeah, I think they've done it twice.
Yeah, they did it from, Stallings 91 into 93. They won 28 straight there. And then they broke the streak in 1980, November of 1980, when Mississippi State won in Jackson, possibly the hottest football stadium, like an outdoor steam room, 6-3 on a great sack and fumble recovery by Billy Smith out of Plant City, Florida. Great game. And Coach Bryant went over to the locker room to, talk to the Mississippi State guys after that game, but they broke that streak. Do you get the sense, Georgia's having fun. Do you see, you see it, but explain to people the value of having a Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, Mike Bobo, who's a dog, Will Muschamp, who's a dog. And Will Muschamp is a Georgia guy, but he is liked by people. He's loved by people in Auburn. He's done 3 tours there. But how important it is for those guys to talk to Georgia as they keep climbing up, because as you're getting closer to that record, mentally that can wear the hell out of you, can it?
Yeah, Rob, I don't really think they pay it any mind.
Okay, good.
I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, we were talking to Javon Bullard, and someone asked him about the streak and if there is pressure. And I do really think he was being honest. He said, I don't even know what the streak is right now. And again, it kind of goes back to a lot of what we talked about in the offseason. What Kirby talked about with the message to his team was inherited, not earned. A lot of these guys that are playing now weren't a part of those early wins in the streak. A lot of these guys playing right now didn't have very big roles in that championship last year. That's just sort of the nature of teams changing pace, players being, leaving for the NFL and guys stepping up to play bigger roles. I think it's just a situation where you look at the fact that the roster has changed. I think that it's not the same team that started this streak. They kind of look at it week to week, and something we hear from Kirby a good bit after games. Somebody will ask him about, hey, you guys just tied the record for home wins in a row, or this streak we're talking about. And Kirby always says, his quote is essentially like, I'm not worried about that. I'm just looking for constant improvement. And I think that's how that guy's motivated. And I think it kind of trickles down to his team. They're not really worried about the numbers. They're not really worried about how many games they've won in a row. They just want to get better and try to be playing their best football in December. And if they can continue winning into the playoff.
Well, you see this. Somebody said some young players were born on third base and think they hit a triple. And that, what you just said, and I believe you, because every time I text you, before the show, after the show, you work your ass off. You are at meetings, press conferences, you're working on stories. And that's highly successful people. I've noticed that they are intrinsically myopic. They're focused on the task at hand, and they really don't know what's going on around them, because if they started getting distracted by that, watching the news today is basically watching just human pornography. It's pitiful, and it distracts you from what you need to be focusing on. And I just think, I know Kirby Smart has a degree in business from the Terry College Business at Georgia, but every week he has some angle to motivate that team, because you keep winning and winning and winning. You got to be so careful of not knowing how awful it feels to lose. And you just answered that question. They're just, those players, I didn't really know about the streak. That for Georgia's opponents, that's scary.
Definitely. And I mean, I think the biggest thing to me with Kirby, I can't remember when this was asked, but about the streak, but he said, look, I've been a part of streaks. And, he was part of a long one at Alabama he was at the start of a good run from 15 to 16. Then he left to go to Georgia. But he said, the thing about streaks is they all end. And he said, when ours ends, don't know when that'll be. We're going to go back to the drawing board and fix what went wrong and try to win the next week. I mean, I think he's a guy that understands the big picture very well. I think, again, we've talked about it on the show quite a bit. Son of a high school coach, been around it all his life. He doesn't sweat the small stuff, the achievements and accolades and all that. They come with success, but he's never been a guy that's been just so focused on that. It's about doing your job right every day and seeing what happens after that.
Yeah, and I look at this matchup with Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is 8-1, Georgia's 9-0. Ole Miss, I think the last time they won in Athens was 1996, when Walker Jones and Brock Kreitz ran Heinz Ward down about midfield and saved what would have been a terrible, loss. Ole Miss had 46 scholarship players on the field at that game. It's crazy. But looking at it here in the last couple of minutes, college football playoff right now, and I know you're objective enough to do this. Give me your top 4 at this moment. Just take a picture. It's just a snapshot.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think I would put Georgia number 1 after beating Missouri. I understood why Ohio State got it last week because of having beaten Notre Dame and having beaten Penn State. But I think that Missouri win, that's a good Missouri team, and I think they were 12th in that initial playoff. But I would put them 1, put Ohio State 2 of those 2 wins. I would probably put Florida State 3. I think that they've done a good job. I think that their win over LSU is a little devalued in that first playoff. And then 4, I would put Washington. I was kind of surprised to see Washington left out. That win against Oregon, I think people discount it and say, well, Oregon's the better team, and, maybe Oregon should be over them. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to have stock in what actually happened. So I would put Washington there. I need to see something from Michigan. I'm not really holding anything against Michigan right now with the Connor Stallions thing. My thing is just, who have they beaten? Their best win right now is Rutgers, and this is a pretty good Rutgers team, but it ain't something to build an entire resume on. So I'd probably have Michigan 5, but I'll be interested. I think the biggest thing, and I really harped on this on our podcast, these playoff rankings right now do not matter. Tennessee was the number 1 team in that first playoff ranking last year, didn't make it. You have it over and over again. Where these early rankings, they look very, very different. But the key for Georgia is they've got some big tests coming up, as we've discussed. As long as they win, as long as they take care of business, they'll make the playoff. And I think if they go undefeated, they will be the number 1 seed when it's all said and done.
Well, and they should be. I mean, they're back-to-back national champions. And as they get closer, you're going to start seeing some just incredible play I see from Georgia. And that game Saturday, Ole Miss, Georgia, is going to be must-watch TV. Missouri and Tennessee is the CBS 2:30 game. Ole Miss is 7 o'clock Eastern in Athens Saturday night. There won't be any people raising hell in there in Sanford Stadium. There'll just be a million of them. That's going to be an incredible atmosphere. If you would, Jordan, let people know how they can follow you and keep up with all your great work. Again, you put out so much good information on Twitter or X. Have we officially? There was no press release. It went. I'm changing it because I'm Elon Musk and I'm worth $200 billion. If you've got $200 billion, I guess you can do whatever you want, and you can. But let them know how they can follow you. And as always, we appreciate you showing up. You'd be a great trial lawyer, man. You are always prepared.
I appreciate that. Dogs247.com. I'm still calling it Twitter. Elon's going to have to cut me a check to call it X.
There you
go. But, Jordan Davis Hill on Twitter as well at Dogs247. So, getting ready for a big one on Saturday and looking forward to seeing how this one plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. Have a great day, rest of your week, and everything like that. We'll talk to you next week about Ole Miss and Georgia, and then look ahead to the next one. We'll take a quick commercial break. Be right back with Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, after this.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you on this Tuesday morning, man. Final segment. Great stuff there with Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports covering Georgia. Now we'll head down to Tuscaloosa. We're broadcasting right now from Clarksville on this road trip. Going to be heading back here after the show, back to Memphis. But Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, never, ever a dull moment. Tide got a big win, 42-28 this past Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. And, you know, man, you were right about Jalen Milroe. And something happened in the South Florida game when he did not play. And someone alluded to this on the show yesterday. Maybe Nick Saban was saying, okay, y'all all think Jalen can't play. Here's what we got behind him. And I think since then, Jalen Milroe has evolved. I think also the defense of Kevin Steele. That's why he's on his, third tour of duty with Nick Saban. We talked about that. But Rodney, you know more than anybody, Tider Insider, $48 a year, folks. Be a subscriber. Let's get your takeaways from that win, and then let's look ahead.
Well, I think it was, obviously an incredible win for Alabama. I thought they did a fantastic job defensively in the second half. I know a lot of people will kind of point to Jaden Daniels getting knocked out of the game with about 12 minutes left in the game. So, I mean, yeah, that certainly was something that contributed to probably the way it all ended. I mean, I think certainly LSU would have had opportunities to move the football, maybe score some more points. But I don't think LSU could stop Alabama at that point, frankly. I mean, Alabama was running the ball at will. I think the LSU defense was gassed. And I think, too, that Nussmeier's a really good player. He had a great game against Georgia in the SEC championship game last year. But with all that said, I'll say this, just address this hit. Dallas Turner made a football play. You can say whatever you want to say. I don't think the hit last year on Quinn Ewers was dirty. I don't think he should have been penalized for that hit on Quinn Ewers, in my opinion. I mean, it's when a pass rusher is coming after a quarterback and he hits him right at the millisecond after the ball's delivered, he can't stop himself. I don't care who it is. I've seen more, what would you call blatant hits? I saw a lot of them in Knoxville last year when Bryce Young got hammered, got hit in the head, that weren't called. So, I mean, there's not been consistency on those calls. But anyway, with that all said, I would say this, that if they want to call it a targeting, it might have been. I really, wouldn't debate whether that was or wasn't a targeting. But I will say this, Alabama did get penalized 15 yards, personal foul. And so whatever, it was what it was. But I'll just say this, Rob, to get this out of the way. Anyone saying it was a dirty hit and all this, that's just nonsense. I don't think there was any intent on Dallas Turner's part to hurt, Jaden Daniels intentionally like that.
Well, from player to player, I don't think they do that. But and I looked at it, and I always go back to the source. Kevin Steele doesn't coach that stuff. I mean, I've just watched him throughout his career. Again, I don't know him, met him a few times, but I like him. But, football's a violent game. You're going to get the hell beat out of you. And, targeting calls are subjective. We're certainly not seeing as many of them called this year. And that means to me, Rodney, that the message has gotten down. Look, you're only hurting yourself and your team if you're going to, do blatant targeting. But and I don't know what, again, LSU could not stop Alabama. I mean, Alabama just ran the ball. Milroe, 150 yards rushing. Is that a record all time for an Alabama quarterback? 4 touchdowns as well on the ground?
Yeah, 4 touchdowns is. Now, the rushing yardage is not. But
who was better? Maybe one of the wishbone quarterbacks?
Well, I can tell you, Stedman Shealy, I don't know if he still holds the record, but he ran for 190 yards against Mississippi State in 1979.
Yeah.
That would have been the one that comes to my mind. I'm not sure if, Hurts broke that or, maybe, but I because I just don't remember. I know Jalen had some really good rushing games, yardage wise, but I do remember, and it may not be Stedman Shealy any longer. I just can't remember, to be honest with you, but I do remember Stedman held that record for a long time.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line, when you take a look at college football this year, and we just had Vince Ferrara on in the first segment, the most called penalty this year in college football is not targeting. It's not offsides, illegal procedure. It's the false starts. Over 1,300, and that's still 200 fewer than at this time last year. And it's almost, you get the feeling, Rodney, whenever your team has a big return on a punt or a kickoff, that there's going to be the obligatory flag thrown, somebody held or did a block in the back. That drives me crazy. But looking
for a blindside block.
Yeah, blindside block. But targeting is, again, football injuries this year seem like they're down. Do you get that impression from watching as much football as you watch?
Well, I really don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm not up on the injury statistics to comment, but so I really don't know, but you may be correct.
It seems at least there's fewer targeting calls. But got to ask you another question real quick before we move ahead and talk about this Kentucky matchup in Lexington Saturday. It's the 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern game. Do you like not stopping the clock, the running clock? I mean, it's been a positive for Major League Baseball. Do you feel the same way about it being a positive for college football?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess if it works in your favor, it's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when LSU was coming back and they were, getting first downs, I was like, oh, that's good that this clock's still running. But I mean, yeah, I guess it's fine. I mean, I haven't put like a lot of, thought into how long it's actually reduced the games or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably good. Right now, I don't have anything negative to say. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. And, I like this. This is an interesting comment from one of the listeners. Alabama will struggle with Kentucky early. Look at the history of this game. The only time that I can remember Alabama losing to Kentucky in Lexington had to be 1997. They played all those air raid sirens. It was really a wild atmosphere. Prior to that, I think the only other time Alabama had lost at Kentucky was 1927. Warren G. Harding was about to be president or was president at that time, and no one I know was at the game. So, I mean, my dad was born a year later. He was not at that game. But I think, Rodney, Alabama, I think they will. I think they'll struggle early. But, again, I go by my thing. The 11 a.m. Central, 12 Eastern, noon, it favors the road team because the home team crowd A lot of them don't get there till late first, early second quarter. And if you jump on top early, as evidenced by Arkansas going on the road and winning at the Swamp last Saturday, they jumped up 14-0. Man, you're in control. You take the crowd out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's probably, my feel is that just my gut feeling is that, I think this is going to be a game where Alabama probably is going to have I don't know that hangover is the right way to put it. I mean, I just think that it could be difficult to play a complete 60-minute game. And I say that because I'm talking the psychology of it. You know, you come off a big win at home against LSU, a very emotional game. There was a lot of stock put in that game all week, obviously, not just with your coaches and the players, but also, just the media, everything, all the things that went into that game. And I think sometimes when you come off a game like that, you win, you've got a lot of emotion after the game, and then all of a sudden, there is a little bit of a letdown. And I don't think that Alabama, I think they're really pushing hard this week to, keep the players focused on, the task at hand. You've got a lot of really big opportunities potentially. And, Kentucky's a very physical football team. They're sound. I mean, Mark Stoops has done an incredible job really there. They're competitive. And I know they got blown out by Georgia, and, Georgia had played a really, really good game. And, but I expect them to play. We do. I mean,
Yeah, Rodney. I think Alabama.
I think.
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah, no,
I'm saying I think the consistency. I think the consistency Alabama has to show in this game, it's a maturity factor. I mean, okay, Jalen Milroe, you had a great game in this last game. You took what they gave you. You rushed for 4 touchdowns, 155 yards. Now you got to take it to Kentucky, and it's going to be a different kind of game. And, you got to protect the ball, So I want to see Milroe show some consistency. I think he's, this is something that I predicted on Tighter Insider TV last Tuesday night, that he was going to have a big game, that this was going to be the game, LSU game, where Jalen Milroe would take another step. And he did. And a lot of it was running the ball. But he also threw for 219 yards, and he protected the ball. No touchdowns, but no interceptions. He didn't fumble the ball. He protected the ball. So can you take that now to Lexington and kind of lead your team? And I think that's going to be a real key.
Well, you look at here, a good comment here. I like this. Ward Cleaver in Northport, teams better put a spy on Milroe. Well, speaking of that, LSU.
I think they had one. I think LSU had a spy on Milroe.
Yeah.
They had a spy on him. I mean, but I think now that he pulled the ball down and started running with it, it totally opens up other things, Rob. I mean, look at some of the plays he made just ad-libbing. The dump off to McClellan for a big gain. He made a great anticipation. He showed great anticipation on that little wheel route. He just dumped over the defender. And he just anticipated that Jam Miller was going to be there. And it was a fantastic play. If Milroe plays like this, I said before the season, again, I'm, not tooting my horn, but, following this program, my observation was that if Milroe can kind of round into a consistent player and use his legs with his, ability to throw the ball, that he could be the most dynamic, explosive player in the country. And I don't know that that's actually true. I mean, in terms of, as I see Jaden Daniels, I'm like, this guy is the real deal, right?
Yeah.
And there's some others, but you get my drift. I think that Milroe can be kind of like those guys in terms of his impact with his ability to run and throw. So, it's going to be interesting. But I'll say this, though, Rob. I will say this. I would like to say this. I sure hope Jaden Daniels is okay. I really do. I think he's the best player, I've seen this year. Of course, Brock Bowers went out. I think Brock Bowers is right there. But Jaden Daniels is an incredible player.
I do think he is. And I just, when you look at a player man, when you're out there playing football, you're right. To me, it's a physical game. But one of the guys, Ben Troop, who's on our show with us a lot, Ben talked about the reason he played in the NFL 5 years after being an All-American at Florida. He said, you see everybody at the players on the opposing team shaking hands and hugging and taking pictures and smiling is because they're just glad they made it through without getting hurt. Because he said, SEC is the best league in the country and it's physical and all that. But the NFL, he goes, it's a collision league.
Yeah.
And you get beat up. And I think that whether people want to admit it or not, the year of the virus lockdowns scared the hell out of a lot of people. And it did because people saw, wow, we had people try to take this game away from us. People that are not sports fans, people that are control freaks, okay, with draconian lockdowns and measures like that. And I think the fans that grew closer together, like, hey, we need each other. That's how I see it. I think it's a waste of time to get caught up in all the negativity because it's not productive. Do things, spend your time on things that make money for you, that are productive. But yeah, I would expect you to say that, you and Gary. My God, y'all are right. I mean, nobody wants to see somebody get hurt. And that game Saturday night, we watched it in Nashville after we've been at the Skinner box. But I see. I'd love to see the ratings on that game Saturday night from Alabama and LSU. I bet they're pretty damn good, Rodney.
I haven't seen them either, but I'll say this: it was a really great atmosphere in Tuscaloosa. I feel a sense of rejuvenation a little bit, and that's not predicting anything for the future. I'm not saying Alabama's going to run the table and play in the SEC championship game even, or win it, or go to the playoffs. None of that stuff. I'm just saying I do sense some rejuvenation here. Rob, when you win like Alabama has won,
yeah.
I know this sounds crazy, and if you haven't experienced that either as a program or even a fan who follows it, winning suddenly is not. It becomes a grind mentally. You just want to win. I mean, it's not fun. It's because it becomes just, if you lose, it's a disaster. I don't know how else to put it. And I do think that the way Alabama over the last 2 years have, of course, they played 2 years ago in the national championship game. I get that. I don't think that they were what they had been that year, but still, they almost won the national championship. And then last year, everybody's been predicting since last year that, the collapse of Alabama football.
Yeah.
And I think that before the season, there were a lot of Alabama fans and followers who thought, you know what, this program's slipping. We're at the end. It's over. And I think that now they look at things differently, especially since the Texas game. I mean, it's like there's a rejuvenation here. It's not the grind. It's like now we're the same kind of program that most other programs are. We're trying to get to the top. We're not there. And I say I'm referring to the fans.
Yeah.
They're thinking that, Rob, that it's just different now. It's a different feeling. And I sense that in the stadium on Saturday night. It's just a rejuvenation of, hey, you know what? We're hungry again. So, I know I kind of went on a long spiel there, but
I agree with what you just said. You painted a very realistic and very true picture. You put all that minutia in the vernacular beautifully.
I mean, that's just kind of the feel I have. Now, again, they've got a tough game coming up against Kentucky. I mean, that's a really tough game. You got to get through that. And then you've got Chattanooga, obviously. And then, look, you go to Auburn. That's going to be an extreme. That's going to be one of the more difficult challenges. People don't laugh. I mean, and there's some people out there that this is a rivalry. And this, Rob, like none other. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so when they go down there, it's going to be a real challenge. So, they've got to get through these next few games, and, we'll see if they can position themselves for something bigger.
Yeah. And, look last week at the end of Bedlam, all the comments, Mike Gundy, Brent Venables, and Gundy was more vocal than anybody. I think a lot of people thought Oklahoma would just, curb stomp Oklahoma State. Final score, Oklahoma State 27, Oklahoma 24. That all rivalry games are dangerous, and it all depends on where you play the game. That has a lot to do with it, but you're right. And I tell you, fans, and I agree with this, Eddie in Buford, Georgia, that success will become a burden if you let it take over, and it will, because you're so afraid of losing, you don't allow yourself to enjoy winning.
Well, and the winning, Rob, it's almost like winning doesn't necessarily satisfy.
I know.
It's like you become numb to winning. And I mean, it's hard to, it's just like I think about, and I've thought about this many times. What would Texas A&M fans give just to go to the SEC championship game? I don't think they've won a conference title of any kind. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to go on memory here. I don't think they've done anything since like 1998. I think they beat Kansas State in the Big 12 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was 96 or 98 when they last won a conference championship.
Yeah. So think about, if they were going to Atlanta, just going to Atlanta, I'm not talking about winning it. And I grew up in South Texas, okay? So I hear from a lot of Aggies, and I'm just using them as an example.
I know.
Okay, they would be ecstatic just to go to Atlanta. Yeah. And here you are, Alabama fans. You've won 6 national championships since, Nick Saban's been here. And you almost get numb to what you're doing. You're winning a national championship. It's like, and I just remember at the end of the Ohio State game a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when they won the national championship game, Rob, it was like, okay, they won the national championship, but it's not new. It's not new anymore,
Yeah. Well, some of the most unhappy people I know are people who have a lot of money, because, it seems like the fun is almost getting it, chasing it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get it, look at lottery winners, all the studies on them that lose their mind.
They go broke.
Go broke,
Yeah.
And money can become an intoxicating elixir, which fires all the synapses in your brain. The 3 chemicals in your brain that make your moods, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. It's true.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
I'll give you a piece of philosophy here.
Yeah. Yeah.
All false gods are empty.
You're right. That is true, because you think about A&M. Let's look at them, and Texas is about to be in the league. I'm on the road, but you can't see my set. I've got my SEC set that Barnwood Brenda built for me. It's got Texas and OU already on the map. But look at the money A&M has, closing in on $19 billion for their endowment. They get 1/3 of the oil and gas revenue from the Texas state legislature every year. The other 2/3 go to Austin. Well, their endowment at Texas is about $42 billion, A&M $19 billion. Vanderbilt's pushing $11 billion. And the rest of the SEC schools, I think $3.5 billion, maybe Florida, but everybody else is, $2, $1.5, $1 billion. Mississippi State $689 million. And Ole Miss about $788 million. But who won Saturday in Oxford? Ole Miss 38, Texas A&M 35. In this millennium, for those of you folks that live north of the Mason-Dixon line, that means in this century, A&M has 1 double-digit win season. Put things in even more perspective. Dabo Swinney, Clemson, from 1900 to 2007, 107 years. Clemson won 10 or more games 12 times in 107 years. Since Dabo took over halfway through 2008, Clemson has won 10 or more games on 12 occasions. It's not going to happen this year. You got a lot of success. But you look at it, like you say, A&M, their fan base is starved. If Ole Miss were to find a way to somehow go to Atlanta this year, they would take 100,000 people to Atlanta, you know? And then you got, I mean, I found myself at the Auburn Vanderbilt game Saturday. My wife goes, God, you're horrible. Because I wanted Auburn, you know, to get 45 or 52 points, but I'm always looking at the game. I mean, I'm a fan too, but I'm going to be objective on this show. But you're always thinking, how's that going to play out against Alabama or Georgia or LSU? And I think that Auburn and Alabama fans, especially that rivalry, we're in the same state with each other. We're everywhere you go, Memphis, Nashville, they're Auburn and Alabama fans everywhere. You're right. Coaches, all coaches will tell you, son, don't ever fail to appreciate success. Just like work. You know, when you get a Post-it note, you've been working a 15-hour day and you come home, there's a Post-it note on the refrigerator door from your wife. I'm picking up dinner. I'll be home shortly. That's nice versus figure something out. There's nothing to eat here. You know? I mean, Rodney, you're right. I mean, you've made me feel better. I'm going to start calling you the Bob Newhart of this show, but Doug Dean does it with the AU dose. You know, things, he goes, God bless people, fans. You're right. I'm a fan. And I agree with what this guy said, David in Memphis. Saban will recall 2023 as his favorite team he's ever coached. He might be right because I've seen him coaching more and being more involved and more going back to, I better be involved with everything. I can't delegate too much authority, but you're seeing what happens. The coach can't care more than the players care. That's what it boils down to. And the fans, God, we need to pause for a moment and just get on our knees and give thanks for all we got. I mean, because we got the best league in America. And it's so easy to be cynical and negative. You know, that flush that down the toilet, man. You're Rodney, you've woken us up. Appreciate what we got.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I think that your comment there that was from your viewer, I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I don't know if it'll be his favorite team, but I'll say this: I think the competitive spirit of the team is something that Nick Saban is thrilled with. I think because this is you can sense this if you follow Alabama football. This team has a lot more competitive spirit. It seems like team chemistry. All of the individual stuff seems to be out the window. And I think they're playing more. And look, I'll say Saban, obviously, it starts all with Saban. But I think one of Saban's best hires was Kevin Steele. And I think Kevin Steele brought a lot of that fire back on the defensive side of the ball. Right now, Kevin Steele right now is, and he's had a lot of success, but in the eyes of Alabama fans, Kevin Steele is officially he's becoming a guy who is going to be recognized for many years, I think, for what he's done for Alabama football this year in terms of helping this defense get straightened out, because they're playing with this kind of intensity, the effort, and all of those things that we used to see in some of these Alabama defenses that have probably been missing. And I'm going to say since maybe 2017 when Pruitt left after that season to go to Tennessee. I don't think we've seen this kind of intensity and effort and fundamentally sound play. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have mistakes, breakdowns, whatever, but they're just so much better, I think, in a lot of those areas. So I think that Kevin Steele's had a lot to do with the defensive and several other coaches on that defensive side too.
Yeah. Next time you're talking to him, ask him about his speech he gave before that Auburn game about adversity. You know, I don't know if he can. He said it best. He said, "Look, don't wait for bad things to happen. You be their adversity. We are your adversity." That sums up the way he coaches. And you're right. I like this. This is another one from David in Memphis. Money is like salt water. The more you drink of it, the more you want of it. I'll tell you, there was a a man, Dickie Scruggs, big Ole Miss supporter, went to federal prison for a while, was given a concurrent sentence while he was in federal prison. I'll never forget reading. It was in Aberdeen, Mississippi at the federal courthouse, or Amory. And the judge said, Mr. Scruggs, I see standing before me a brilliant legal mind, a man who's accumulated tremendous wealth and success in life. But you remind me of the old Roman proverb, the more salt water you drink, the more thirsty, the more of it you want. And that's you with money. What a shame. And he gave him a concurrent 7.5-year sentence. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. But man, that is right. The more success you have, what you then do is you work hard to keep getting it. And I don't think fans appreciate the pressure that the players and the coaches are on to produce. Nick Saban makes a lot of money. So does his staff. But you know what? You saw what happened after one loss to Texas. And we were watching it down in Orange Beach, man. Remember that loss? And the world was, didn't the world spin off off its axis, and it was over, and it was the end of time. But look what happened. The players didn't agree with that narrative, did they?
I think the coaching staff had to really do a great job of holding them all together. And I think some of the players, a lot of the players, key players bought in. And I still say, too, I've got to give Jalen Milroe a lot of credit because, I think he was key in helping keep, players together. I think he's got a great competitive spirit about him. Even though he makes mistakes, a lot of mistakes sometimes head scratching mistakes. He has. Now, he didn't so much can sell a shoe, but I'm just saying, people you talk about being counted out. Yeah. He got counted out, and the guy always bounced back and make a play. Yeah. It's a competitive spirit, and I think he's been a big part of, kind of keeping the team together after that game you're talking about against Texas.
Yeah, sports teach us the lessons of life. As Eddie Robinson said one time in an interview, he goes, football teaches the lessons of life. He goes, you get knocked down, you get back up. You keep getting back up. But once you quit getting back up and fighting, you're done. So get back up and keep fighting on the football field and in life. That's the best thing. Hey, look, love that quote. All false gods are empty. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Go out and help people you don't even know that can do nothing for you. Kind words and kind deeds are immeasurably important. And we have the best guests, the best sponsors, the best viewers imaginable on Sidelines. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And Rodney, always appreciate your time, your thoughts, your insight. Let people know how they can follow you and keep up with you. And I don't even ask anymore. You go, I never know what we're going to talk about till I show up. And Gary just says, let's go. But let them know about Tyler Insider, and we'll do it again next week here on the May Veterinary Clinic, Tuscaloosa and Northport. 2 locations open every day of the week. But Camp May for dogs and cats, Sundays only opened on Sundays, the clinic, 3 to 5 p.m. for drop-off and pickup. But Camp May is open every day. The best veterinary clinic, the best veterinarians and technicians and support staff you will find anywhere. Rodney, tag us out.
Yes, it's TighterInsider.com. It's only $48 a year, and you can get instant access with your credit card. Or if you prefer, there is an address there to send a check for $48. But it gives you all our premium information, but also, Rob, our All Sports Forum. That's our community of Alabama fans there. A lot of exchange there on our All Sports Forum. It's constant. It's non-ending. It's 24/7 right there on TighterInsider.com if you're an Alabama fan.
Hey, great stuff as always. Have a great week, Rodney. We'll do it again next Tuesday. Until tomorrow, we are out of here. Thank you.